Because then that is the time we can be able to live a meaningful life that is productive, both spiritually, physically, and every other engagement. Because then, like we have seen from the submission from our senior pastor, you can see that indeed, when we are indebted, there are so many things that go wrong, and that we are not even able to honor God and be able to serve God using our finances. So, in this case, there are things that we really need to remind ourselves and be able to embrace for purposes of prudent debt management. So, like for example, we must first of all understand our situation, our financial situation. That is very important. That because every other time you go for services, you go for goods, you have to spend. Yes. You have to spend. That's a fact. When we come to church and you have to support the ministry, just like, for example, we're talking about planting the church. As a matter of fact, resources are required. So we must spend. But then it's important for us to consider this is what we endeavor to spend. But do we have the resources? So what we want to spend and the resources that we have, we need to plan so that our budget fits within the resources that we have. Because we are not going to build Rome in one day. But bit by bit, God will guide us and we'll get there. So we are saying that, therefore, each one of us, it should be upon each one of us, in whatever situation we are, we need to really crystallize the situation as it is and appreciate that this is where God has placed us, but then we endeavor to move to the next stage. But from where we are, let us plan within the resources that we are able to generate. And then develop a realistic plan. Because when we are planning, there must be the factors that we want to consider. That as a household, as a church, as a Christian, that there are those particular expenses that we incur. Some of them are fixed, some of them are flexible. Now the fixed ones are very easy because you can be able to really pick them out. If you are paying rent, you are staying in a rental place, you know that this is the much I need to pay. If you are paying for security, for example, where you are, you know that this is an expense I have to pay at the end of the day. If you know that you are paying fees, you know that this is what... So there are those fixed factors that we can be able to total, and you will see that for sure, because there's no way you are going to achieve what you are working on if you don't address those fixed expenses. But then there are those that are flexible and they are varying. And those ones are entirely in our control, because those are areas that we can really control and check on our expenditures. So you'll find that, for example, if it's about it's lifestyle related, you just want to, for example, say you want to purchase a car. You are at liberty to decide which one you want to buy, because of course you are looking at, do you have that kind of the resources at your disposal? So you'll make that decision. If it's a meal you want to go for KFC, that is flexible. You can still get an equivalent elsewhere which would be cheaper than that. So we are saying that there are those variables that you can look at. If you are paying electricity bills, it is how you consume that will dictate what you'll pay, you see? So in that case, you can make those controls. If you're using water, you have water bills. These are things that are within our control. So what we are saying is that it is important for us to be able to have a realistic plan that will be able to support and meet our needs as far as our budget is concerned. And then we must also be able to draw a clear line between what we really need and what we want. Sometimes that is where we get it wrong. That let us advance to the wants once the needs are met. It's like the illustration that Pastor has already given us here. That for sure, everybody would love to have a home, a good house, okay? And everybody will also wish to have a good car, those good things we want. But really, if you have 3 cars and you are parking in a rental place, okay, it doesn't look very bad because you're okay with it. But don't you think under normal circumstances, there's something seriously wrong? So that's why we are saying, is that car 3, is it a need or it's a want? You'll realize for sure you don't necessarily need the 3 at that particular point. Maybe you need a house more than the 3 cars. So we are saying that it is important as Christians to be able to separate so that we can be able to focus on what we really need and then advance from there after we meet our basic needs. And then pay the bills on time. We know that there are bills that if by any chance we delay to settle them, they will attract charges. Now these are bills that we really need to avoid. We need to make sure that we pay these kind of bills early enough. And it's for a very simple reason, because you'll realize that when you have this kind of bills that you delay and some charges roll over, they become very expensive. And try to imagine if you did that 12 times in a year, cumulatively, you will be shocked that you spend a lot of money when you should not have spent on whatever you spend on, because you are just paying for the charges. And yet this is money that you would even have saved and would impact on your future positively. So I think we need to really check the kind of bills that we know that they normally have rollovers in terms of charges. We try to make sure that when we are documenting, we keep the timelines. Then this will be able to minimize on the wastages that will be as a result of the extra charges. And then the use of the credit. Now, if by any chance we have picked a credit, and like Pastor has put it rightly, that let us borrow to acquire an asset. If there are things that surely we can acquire without necessarily having to borrow, let's avoid borrowing. So you'll find that when we are acquiring credit, it should be for a good purpose. And that particular purpose, for example, if we want to acquire a fixed asset, if there is land and there's a car, and you don't have both of them, then I think common knowledge will demand that you'll pick the land, because then on that you are going to build a lot of resources and you can comfortably acquire that car without necessarily having to borrow. So I think it's important that as Christians we endeavor that every other time we pick any debt, let us be able to have it crystal clear. What is it that I want to do before we even get into the debt? Then once you get the resources, you exactly execute that. You will never regret. And it will move you from one step to another level. So I think that is important. And you've seen there's this fashion where people with flash cards, credit cards, I think there's that feeling, some people will want to feel like, okay, it's a class symbol, I use a card, me, I don't have paper money. It looks very nice, it's fashionable. But the reality is, if you have your own 1,000 shillings paper money like this, and you go to a supermarket, you will budget within that figure. But where you have some room, some imaginary money that you don't have, you are likely to go overboard. But eventually, the kind of penalty that will come with it, the kind of interest will be punitive. And as a matter of fact, by the way, every time you go for most of the debts when you're going for them, it's fun. But none of them is fun when you're settling. You will never enjoy settling any kind of debt. Just imagine. So assuming now you don't put it into proper utilization, it's misery. The entire future is messed up. So we are saying that we need to really focus on how we also utilize the resources that we get through borrowing. And then there are those things that we also do that many a times they expose us to a lot of risks. They enhance our debt levels in terms of loading. And these are some of the things that we need to avoid. Like, for example, failing to plan. If you don't plan, you can be sure you are that vulnerable. You are exposed to a lot of risks. And that is why sometimes you've had some people in the society wanakuambia, na jana nilikuwa na pesa, na sijui hiyo pesa ilienda wapi. Ama kuna mtu amenigonga. Na kuna mtu amekugonga. Just because you have it and you fail to plan, you think it's abundant. There's no time you will have adequate resources. And there are a lot of good things that come your way, and you can comfortably spend on it. Do you know, by the way, even if you are lending money and sometimes you start struggling to recover that money, sometimes it is because you have some money that you don't seem to have planned for. Yes. That is why when somebody just approaches and says, hey, but I have a big problem, so you need an idea. Because you don't have a plan, even for the little you have, you are likely to give it out. When in real sense, practically, you don't have that money. You see? So that is why planning is very critical. When we fail to plan, so many things will go wrong. We end up wasting a lot of resources. And then we also need to set realistic kind of goals that are achievable. They should be achievable on the basis of what is it that is required. You get? So for example, you visit your friend, you visit your whatever it is, and you see what they are doing, and you feel like the next day you want to do the same thing. Why can't you take time and engage them and just ask them, how did you get here? What it has taken them to get there? Let them just take you through. Then you'll come to appreciate, fine, I would love to get there. But then there is what I need to start doing today. So that for the next 5 years, at least my dream will come true. We avoid this issue of imagining and creating castles in the spaces, and that eventually you just go into depression. Because this is what is happening all over the place. Many young people, by the way, and naturally there's that kind of competition, that you want to look like the other one. That because you left college together the other day, you appeared in the graduation ceremony together, then after 1 year, you realize, Allah, we are not living the same standards. I can tell you, you are going to have a problem. Sit down and find out what is it that one has had to invest. Some of them are even investing when you're in school with them. You never just bother to invest. I can tell you. You know, like for the students and the young people, let me tell you. You know, we are the type who always assume itakuwa tu. Father atanipa tu. Mother atanipa tu. Sindaitisha fees. But let me tell you, out of that 10,000, out of that 20,000, that even help has given you, imagine you can save your own money. You start cultivating the culture of saving. By the way, I remember I bought some shares. I didn't even understand what it meant. Sometimes back when I was a second year. And I was just told by a friend that there's something called shares. I think it was Mumias was selling some shares. And so I just bought, I think, worth 2,000 shillings. Of course, it collapsed. But you see, after some time, nikaona hii pesa yangu sinakaa tu pale. After I had completed university, niliuza around 20,000 worth of money. So, but I regretted later on. But I also don't regret because the company also was run down. But assuming that it was up and running. And when I was doing that, first of all, I didn't understand what it meant. I just did it because others were doing. But it was an idea where you are investing. So even the young people today, I think we need to embrace that. The little that you have, that little that you have is what can build into a whole mountain. So let's not wait that there is some special money seated somewhere that when I complete my studies, I'll just happen to have money. No. Let's start working on it. Purpose that we can be able to save. And this is something I think even as parents we need to really encourage the young people. That they need to understand. They need to start saving for their future today. And it will make a whole difference. You can be sure it will make a whole difference. So we are saying that let us learn that everything requires a hand of time. Yes. Your commitment, your availability, you need to sacrifice. So that we are not expecting that you'll just wake up and it happens, Like the pop generation, young people, many of them, they just want like today, akiamuka kesho, they are already there. Akipata kazi leo, anaona wengine wanapaka magari hapo, anasema, huyu jamaa kwani mbona anapaka hiyo gari hapa, wacha. Mshahara wangu ya pili mimi nachukua loan. I want to get a machine better than that. And that's what they do. And I tell you, this is what is happening. But this fella that you are trying to look at and giving you the standards, maybe bought this car after having worked for 20 years. Yes. You want to buy it after working for 1 month. You are messed up. That is for a fact. You will not recover out of that thing. And you'll go in depression. Because what it takes, you really have no idea. Somebody has had to invest. So I think if you want good things, let us give it a hand of time. Let us persevere. Let us look unto God and just pray that God will forever guide us on the correct route. So that what we get is something that will be able to stand the test of time. And so you will realize that, for example, if you look at what Luke is telling us in 14:28, for which of you desiring to build a tower does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it. Now this is what, wewe usiende kupanga vile unataka kufanya miradi zako kwa sababu una bet. Unajua young people are very interesting. Anakuambia hii bet nikiekelea tu vizuri. Hii ni sure bet. Na anapanga vitu anataka kufanya na hiyo pesa yenye hana. Mpaka anachukua fees ile mzazi amengangana. A parent has really struggled to raise that 30,000 or that 20,000. But this young person in some college somewhere comes and sits down and listens, to an expert and tells them, ukiekelea hii kichwa, ukiekelea hii, sure bet. Anapiga hapo 50,000. Na amepanga kitu atafanyia 2 million. Hiyo pesa inazama. Atafanya nini next? You've just messed up your life because you are planning for something that is not realistic. You are gambling with your own life. So what we are saying is that as Christians, we need to be able to foster, the idea that if we have to be who we want to be tomorrow, let's just work for it. Call unto God. Let's sacrifice. Let us believe that in small bits, we'll eventually get there. And we focus ourselves. Financial indiscipline. And Pastor has rightly talked about it. That is a serious challenge. Spending more than what you have is in discipline. For sure it is in discipline. Yaani wewe uko na 500 kwa simu yako, unaenda kwa supermarket, unaangalia, unaona vitu zile zimekuwa mzuri, ziko na offer, huku plan utanunua, lakini unaona lakini hii ni 700, but niko na Fuliza. Na unanunua tu. You know, you are spending more than what you have. To get out of Fuliza, okay, if there's anybody mwenye hajakuwa kwa Fuliza, you must be a very lucky Kenyan. Kama ujui, tunaweza kuambia how to enroll on Fuliza. But I'm telling you, it is so enticing, Fuliza is so enticing, that to resist, it requires a lot of discipline. You know, that you have no money, but you have purchasing power. You know, it sounds a miracle, you know, but when it comes to settling, there's no fun. And you will be indebted forever. Every day ukitumia vile pastor alisema, mtu ukitaka kutumia mtu pesa lazima umuulize squeeze. By the way, muulize ulikuwa unasema nikutumie, nitumie ile namba ndatuma, but you have their number. By the way, you need to do that, because sometimes you create bigger problems for people also, as much as you think you're helping them. Muulize tu, hata mimi niulize tu, niambie bwana, lakini ulikuwa umesema nitumie tu ile namba yako, alafu ndakwambia yes. And Safaricom is so kind. By the way, people are so kind. Kuna sasa pochi wameleta hiyo. Why do you think they are doing that? Actually, they're just enhancing our vulnerabilities. When they are giving you these cushioning products, they want you to remain indebted. Because you know you're trying to run away, so you will want to think it is safer for you. But the rollover has not stopped. And they'll catch up with you eventually. It will be very painful. So I think the fact is that let us not, for financial discipline, let's try the much we can to avoid spending money we don't have. To start with, hiyo mkate zile lazima ukule leo. Kama imeshindikana, si wacha ukule after 3 days. Uta afford tu. Unaenda kwa duka unakopa hiyo mkate. And by the way, some of these small things, they really embarrass us. Even your self-esteem goes down. Yes. Even when you walk around, lazima uchungulie. Huyo shopkeeper anaweza kuwa. Because you know, unataka uingie na kama ziwa na ulikopa yake na hujarudisha. So unaangalia kama anakuona. It's so miserable, I tell you. And these are things we do as Christians. So I think what we need to accept is this. God cannot be that unfair. And God cannot forsake us. Let's just do the right thing. Let us honor God. Let us pray. And let us keep trusting. We'll live ile maisha unaona ni ya chini, but vile itapanda, you may not even notice umepanda. Others will be telling you, hey boss, kwani what is bad? Kwani umepata jackpot? Ushasikia mtu anasema, hey bwana, kwani uko na jackpot? Because alikuwa amezoea wao unamuomba na amekaa sana umuombi. You have just organized yourself and you accepted, I think let me live within 2,000. I live within 5,000 when I get there. So I think this is what, and you'll have all your peace. And when you are peaceful, let me tell you by the way, your brain is very constructive when you are peaceful. When you are not peaceful, you are always struggling, chasing that which is hostile to you. You have no space to think about anything in terms of creativity and innovations. You don't have that space. Yeah. Hata unazima simu wasikutafute. Na saa zingine mwingine anakutafuta akupatie business idea mahali akuite ufanye kazi ya kulipa. Lakini ulizima kwa sababu mshwari wanakupigia sana, kwa sababu Zenga wanakutafuta, kwa sababu Tala wanakutafuta, then you will lose a lot of opportunities. So that thing is embarrassing and it is costly. So we need to really endeavor to live within our means and maintain a high level of discipline. The issue of resisting change. When change comes, look at it and ask yourself, is there any positive thing? Fine. The rest I can see it's negative. But is there any single thing that is positive in this change? When Corona came, you have seen people giving testimonies that they ventured into areas that they have never imagined. Yes. And some of them have quit completely where they were. There was that kind of a shift. And the change came and they embraced and they saw an opportunity. As Christians, we need to move with the time. Yes. And be able to scan the horizon everywhere we are. Next. Now, some of the Pastor already took us through what we need to do. But in addition to that, we also need to know what we owe, just having a list. Anytime you owe 1 or 2, 3 institutions or people, you must have a record of what you owe so that you are also monitoring how you are performing. and you know where to tighten, you know how to plan your resources, you know where to put more weight, because then that also gives you a lot of hope. You realize that indeed I'm moving. But when you also don't document, you are always confused, because you don't know which one to prioritize, which are not to prioritize. Sasa zingine umelipa hii jana na kumbe ilifaa uilipe next week, na ya kesho nayo ndio hii, sasa unapigiwa simu. It introduces a lot of confusion. That is a fact. So we must be able to plan. We know what we owe and who we owe. Then we schedule the payments. Even if it's small bits, let us just endeavor to reduce, because the idea is to bring it down. If you paid a cent today, you definitely have reduced what you owe. Implement the payment strategies, so you have to pay by considering the one that you think has, you give them weighting factors. The one that you believe, you really need to dispense with first, arrange them in that priority. Okay, next. Then trim your budget, just like Pastor has indicated. We just need to scale down. Those things that we know that are not as important, forget about them. Just focus on what you really need. Then the others will eventually come in, okay? Will Smith tells us that too many people spend money they haven't earned to buy things they don't need, to impress people they don't like. Pastor alikuwa anatupigia story ya kwamba a friend who had purchased some machine, at some point anampigia simu, amepata puncture, anamwambia amtumie pesa kidogo asaidie kurepair hiyo puncture. Unajua kuna vitu zingine ukiambia watu lazima ujisikize kwanza. Wewe ujisikize kwanza. By the way, si kwa ubaya, but that could be an indicator that the reason why you did what you did is not that you purpose to do that. Maybe hata mahali unaishi unaona kila mtu amenunua magari kubwa kubwa, sasa unasema hapana, I don't want to look like I don't belong here. I must do something. Well, unajua whatever they are doing, what is informing them? How do they manage to do it? Okay? Or even my friends, I see them doing this, I must also do that to belong. That should never bother you. What you have focused on for your life is what is very important. How you want to move, this is a race you are running on your own, and look unto God that you have to get to your destiny. So many a times we get into ventures that we never planned that we can ever get into, just because of that influence. And you end up cocking yourself there, resources are consumed there, you don't know how to come out of it. Diversify sources of income. Pastor has talked about the issue of additional streams of income, which can be based on our skills. Even for those who are in employment, sometimes you are in employment because of some skill that you offer there. And that skill you can also offer in the outside market. Let's create that time. Let's be able to venture into other options on the basis of our skill, our passion, and access to even some equipment or to some opportunities. You can take advantage of that, and you are able to explore additional sources of income. And that for sure will cushion you. It will get you out of this issue of debts. Plan to stay out of debt. And that's the ultimate thing, that eventually every other normal person does not want to owe. Just like the scriptures don't expect us to owe. Let us make deliberate effort. And Pastor said, mambo ya new debts wachana nayo. You are struggling with Zenga, you are struggling with the Mshwari, you are bringing Okash on board. I mean, you will never get out of this cycle. But if we purpose that I'm not going to get to any other land again, let me work with what I have, I reduce on this, and every time you reduce on them, your income enhances. Yeah. And your lifestyle just improves naturally. Why do we need to settle debts? Pastor did refer to Romans 13:8. I don't want to belabor that. As well as Psalms 37:21. So it is in the scriptures, biblical. As a Christian, we must be able to appreciate from that point. And if you are living by paying debts, you will never serve God. By the way, you don't have that space. Where do you get that time? Sasa kama hata umekaa hapa na ule mtu unaoa amekuja kwa gate, anagonga anasema huyu jamaa anajua kwa hebu niitie. Next Sunday utakuja church. Si kwa sababu anajua uko hapa. And any resource that you get, the first thing that you always are worried about are those debts. Church is secondary. You will not tithe. Na unajua, ule speaker alikuwa hapa juzi, ule Reverend Kinyua. Alisema kitu, those of us who are here, and was referring to this board. I think as Christians and members of this church, we really have to call unto God and just pray. Yeah. Because if pastor confesses that we are planting another church, na kule ati hakuna deni la shamba, na hapa the mother church is being auctioned, and we are just okay. We come and worship and go home. Why? I want to believe it's not that we are not willing to do something. But if we can make a deliberate effort to reduce on what we owe elsewhere, that we know we can control, I can assure you and I believe we can be able to settle this thing. We just reorganize and manage our debts. Just manage our debts. You know, what we spend every month without planning, each one of us here, is more than 2,000, is more than 5,000. Money we don't plan to spend, but we just spend it. But when it comes to a commitment that we have made ourselves, we are sluggish, all of us. I think it is ungodly if we know that this is what we are supposed to be doing and we are not doing it. It is sinful. Lakini pastor watu wamenyamaza, sijui kama wanalala. Wako tu. So I think let each one of us reflect and ask ourselves these hard questions. Let us ask ourselves these hard questions. Because even if it was a club and you patronize, you are a member of that club, you must spend. Imagine you must spend. You will not tell me you belong to that club or whatever it is, Parklands, or whatever, and you are not spending. No. Those guys spend money to remain members, to ensure everything in that club is working. So if this is our club, we have every reason to make deliberate efforts to make it work. Na kila mmoja wetu tuombe Mungu. Mungu anaweza tufungulia, na Mungu anatufungulia kila siku. And you know, and pastor has said this so many times, God blesses us so that we can also bless others. But if you are blessed and you want to be a net consumer, it will go away. You'll just be a pauper the next day. Let us embrace undertaking charity work. Charity work has massive returns. Mungu anakulipa pap. Mungu anakulipa. You know, Pastor, me, I can tell you of course it's not strictly about this, but sometimes some testimonies can teach people lessons sometimes. You know? When you sit here, there's somebody somewhere who sacrificed for you to become who you are. There's somebody somewhere. Some of those people, you have never met them. You even don't know them. But somebody somewhere sacrificed for you to be who you are today. Do you ever remember to just even tell them thank you? Do you even remember to just even tell a friend that, look, the way you see me, there is somebody X somewhere who ever held my hand? Do we ever share that? Ama tunasema we just dropped and we happen to be where we are. And so, how do you give back? If you're not going, and there's no rule that says that you give back to the same person, but also identify other areas of need. Yes. You know, and give. God will be happy and will reward you the more. Sasa ukikuwa ule una intake tu lakini huwezi toa, you become stale. Yeah, you become stale. And then there's no room for more to come in. Yeah. And then God also realizes that, you're like dead, so you are not going to be productive. So you can use somebody else who you think could be productive. And these things, when you go back home, in the villages where we come from, you have so many illustrations that you can give. Yes. Or people who chose not to support anything and anybody else. Those days, they look like they had the ability. Today, how are they? Those are facts. You'll see them. So let us not wait to get there. Let us make a deliberate effort wherever we are, to make a contribution, to make that place better than we found it. And we are not going to do that if we are carrying all the debts on our backs. We must manage and fight to minimal levels. Then we focus on how we support moving forward. Thank you. So every time you borrow money, you are robbing your future. Pastor has really elaborated on that. I want to tell us that debts are like children. The smaller they are, the more noise they make. That is Spanish proverb. And we have talked about them. You will not hide anywhere when you owe. No. You will always stand out because of your actions, because of your attitude, because how you conduct yourself. You will never have peace. Can we scale them down? Can we scale them down to zero? And the potential bestowed upon us inherently will manifest itself. Thank you, Pastor.
Praise God.